forth in there. As for SMU getting in over Bama or Miami, the funny thing was, Sam, in the conversation, why was it all SMU or Bama and not Indiana or Bama?
I don't know. I really don't. I mean, personally, I'll say this. I think strength of schedule is a really overrated thing to look at. The difference between team number 15 and team number 50 in strength of schedule is like one game, and it's like 2 or 3 wins between that game. It's really not a lot that throws off strength of schedule. So if you're looking at opponent adjusted metrics, Indiana is up there with the best teams in the country. So Indiana probably deserves to be up there, right? They won all of those games. And part of the reason their schedule doesn't look as good as it could was because Indiana beat all of those teams. All those teams have a loss in there to Indiana.
That's
part of it. Like, you can talk yourself in circles with this. So
it's so true, because if you look at Bama's opposing teams, 2 of the teams are bowl eligible because they beat Bama. So Bama's like, oh, we played all these bowl eligible teams. The only reason they're bowl eligible is because you lost to Oklahoma and you lost to Vandy. Otherwise, they wouldn't be bowl eligible.
It works both ways. I think
at the end of the day, the 3-loss thing for me, like, I agree with you that I feel like the committee got it right. I understand if you're an SEC homer, you're going to point to the strength of schedule, whatever. Schedules can be strong, and I get that. That's good. You beat a lot of teams that are pretty good, but you lost 25% of your games. Not 10, not 15. You lost 25% of your games. I'm sorry. It's too many. And maybe you should talk to the SEC who put together this super conference, because that's the reason your schedule's so hard. So, like, I just don't want to hear the bitching. Every freaking coach in that conference is a whiner. Lane Kiffin's been whining for weeks.
Lane
Kirby's
Kiffin
whining about going on the road. Dude, everyone plays 4 road games. What the fuck are you talking about?
They played 8 games in the state of Georgia.
Like, that's just, they whine. They just want to whine. He's yelling at his commissioner that he had to go on the road. You had 4 road games, just like every other freaking team. Like, and then you got Saban there too. You know, let's bring in the former coach of Alabama to ask him if he thinks Alabama should be in the playoff. Well, what the fuck do you think he's going to say? It's stupid.
I don't understand. They created this monster. You wanted this.
It's so dumb.
You didn't lose to non-conference teams that you scheduled. You lost to teams that you purposefully put on your schedule. So I don't know what the issue is. Like, Alabama lost to a perennial rival. They lost to a team that they have played every single year since before you were born, Pete.
Thank you for that.
I mean, before I was born, you were born before your parents were born. So I don't understand what the problem is here.
Yeah, no,
I do think it is significantly harder to go 11-1 versus a mediocre schedule, I think, than it is to have all of the resources and all of the money and all of the talent and go 9-3 against what Alabama scheduled.
I kind of have to agree with that. That's a very interesting way that you put that, Sam.
Because it's so hard to win in the way that
it's very hard to win. 11 games in a regular season is very hard to win. And the funniest thing about the graphic they kept putting on the screen during the selection show was that Bama has this and SMU has this, and the strength of record is this, and SMU's strength of record is this. Well, guess what? The only reason SMU's strength of record was worse than Alabama is because of the championship game. A week ago, SMU had a better strength of record. And so there's just so many nuances that they don't even want to bring up or talk about. And it's a bunch of SEC shills and ESPN trying to, I guess, be objective, but they're doing a terrible job. And Nick Saban is telling everyone we should have the point spread decide. If you want to have the point spread decide the playoff, do it before the season, because you don't have to play any games to set the point spread, Nick. It's freaking, that's the most idiotic thing I've ever heard. Let's have a point spread. You mean the same point spreads that multiple teams did away with this past weekend? Army was a 4.5 point underdog. They won by like 3 touchdowns. Like, the point spread to set the playoff means all the games mean nothing. Like, that is the dumb, and that's all based on public perception anyway.
The SEC is grasping at straws at this point. Like, they had a bad freaking year, and they had a bad year, and they beat each other up in circles, and now they're crying about it. And I don't like this is what you created and this is what you wanted. And you knew this was going to be one of the issues with creating this mega conference is cannibalization. It happens that one or two conferences every year just get cannibalized. And this year it was the SEC. And guess what? You watch that Alabama team, would they be favored? Like they might be favored betting wise against SMU, but I think I might take SMU with the style of play, what's given Alabama issues. Alabama can't stop a nosebleed on defense. I mean, I look at a team like, a team like Indiana, who had dominated teams. They dominated the same competition that Alabama was playing a lot of times by more than Alabama did.
Oh, yeah. Do you think – here's a good question for you. Do you think there's any way Indiana gets blown out by Oklahoma? Because I do not. I don't think there's any way.
There's no shot. There's no shot. And I just – even if they were to like – even if Indiana goes to South Bend and loses that game by 40, guess what? If you want to cry about like you should have beaten Oklahoma. You should have beaten Vanderbilt. You should have.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to yell. It's just like this stuff, like the point spread thing. Of course, Alabama is going to be favored in a point spread over SMU. You know why? Because the public knows Alabama. It's Alabama. Point spread means nothing. It's all about perception. They're trying to get even money on both sides. Like that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, and Nick Saban's a smart man. And he's been on he's said that in the past too.
Yeah.
And I thought it was dumb then, and it's dumb now.
Yeah. There's this idea that you have to be able to earn your way into this thing, or else it's meaningless if you don't.
It's a mixture. People want the best. People say the best teams, but Reese Davis has said this too. Like, it's not the best teams. It is the best of the most deserving teams. That's what it is. It's a mixture of both. You need to be deserving, and you need to pass an eye test, and you need to be considered the best. But you don't just let teams that lose 25% of the games into the playoff. And if you do, they have to win their conference like Clemson. And Alabama didn't even get a chance to play for their conference because they couldn't beat Oklahoma, a mediocre team. And so let's leave that there. SMU gets in. And yes, we are obviously ACC guys. We like Virginia Tech. And so I understand that the SEC is upset. They can be upset if they want. It's the best conference. And I don't dispute that. But Alabama doesn't deserve to be in the playoff any more than SMU does. And that's
SMU had a tougher non-conference schedule by strength of schedule than Alabama did.
According to ESPN's metric.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. All right. So let's talk about the bracket. I've got it on the screen. The format is wonky. I don't think this format is long for the CFP because just in its first year, it creates kind of an unbalanced bracket where the top teams aren't necessarily rewarded for being the top seeds. And so you look at these 4 first-round matchups. We got Tennessee going to Ohio State, Clemson going to Texas, Indiana going to Notre Dame, in-state rivalry there. Or I should say in-state game. It's not a rivalry. And then SMU going to Penn State in kind of a funny juxtaposition in that one. What do you think the hardest round 1 game to pick a winner is?
I think
just pick a winner, not spread.
I think it's that 8-9 game. And the reason is because I don't know, like, what is Ohio State's mentality right now? And also, like, if you look at Ohio State's weakness on the offensive line, giving up the pass rush, they're going up against a pretty darn good defensive line. And they're going up against a team that has started to play a lot better on offense than Tennessee. Like, that's a tough game to me. Ohio State, they have 110,000 people in the stadium. It's loud. They're not the most win at home program in the country. Like, they do lose some of these big games at home. I'm a little bit the other ones. I feel pretty good about the home team. This one,
I think they're all hard to pick. And all the home teams are favored, to be clear.
Yes.
And favored by about a touchdown, if not a little bit more, a little bit less. I think the second one, I just don't know what's going to happen in that Clemson Texas game. Like, it's the 5-12, so it should, in theory, be like the most clear cut. But Texas didn't play a very tough schedule, and the toughest team they played, they lost to twice.
Yeah. I would say though that like Texas has looked dominant and borderline elite a lot more than Clemson has this year. So I'm a little bit curious to
I agree with that.
see.
I mean, there's no doubt about that. Clemson didn't have a great season, but against South Carolina, they played a strong game.
Mhm.
They beat SMU, albeit with a little bit of luck and some defensive stuff going on. That's what you need. But Dabo's a really good coach. And in these kind of games where everything's going to be razor thin margins, maybe he can get them a win against Texas.
We'll see. Yeah, I think, Dabo, you'd feel good with Dabo on your sidelines going into that game. That being said, I think you'd also, I look at what Clemson's issues have been this year, and I just don't think it's a good matchup for Clemson. Let's flip it. Like, I think if Clemson is let's say if Clemson's the 10 seed and they're headed up to play Notre Dame, I'd maybe feel a little bit better about Clemson. I think I'd feel better about Clemson playing Ohio State even. It's just, I think the matchup wise, this is a really tough matchup for Clemson because this is a team that I think can dominate them on the line of scrimmage. I don't think SMU was able to do that. And
Yeah.
I'm a little.
Well, here's the thing though, for me with Clemson and Texas. Texas has not shown a great ability to run the ball due to injury. They've run the ball well in some games, but they didn't against Georgia. And Clemson's weakness is like if they had to play Penn State, like forget it. Clemson's done. Like they wouldn't have a chance. If they had to play Notre Dame, I think Clemson would be in trouble. I think this is one of the better matchups that Clemson could have got, to be perfectly honest with you.
It is, I think from a ceiling perspective, I think it is. I don't really know about Texas again in these big games. Like,
I mean, they beat A&M,
almost beat Georgia.
Who like to run.
Georgia. My goodness, I'm sputtering over my words.
You're having a Phillips moment
for sure.
So
I don't know. I think it's a really good matchup for Texas. I also think that if you're Clemson,
win up outright, yeah.
If you're Clemson, you're saying, hey, we get to play the team who doesn't have an elite win.
Yeah. So let's say Tennessee, Ohio State, hardest one to pick. Easiest one to pick, you think is Notre Dame over Indiana? Or do you think it's Penn State over SMU?
I think Notre Dame over Indiana.
Yeah, that's the Friday night game. First
and also,
playoff.
I don't know, man. I think Penn State over SMU is pretty locked too.
Yeah. I don't know what to make of SMU, honestly, man. Like, I really don't know what we're going to get.
Yeah.
Let's move to this other question I got for you, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
Talked a little bit about the first round winners. Most likely upset. And
in the first round?
Yeah.
I think it is Tennessee over Ohio State.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I hope that doesn't sound like a cop-out taking the 9 over 8, but I do think it's a touchdown spread.
They're all touchdown. I mean, they're all pretty similar. Yeah. So
I just think it's the one that I think people have slept on Tennessee a little bit. That's a really good team.
Yeah. I like Tennessee's odds to win that. And speaking of odds, the Vegas odds to win the whole thing, Oregon is plus 380. This was from FanDuel earlier today. Texas was also plus 380. Did you see that?
That's interesting. I let me look at what I have.
Pull up what you got. This was FanDuel that I had it from before, but it was Texas 380, Oregon 380, Georgia 410, Ohio State 500, Penn State 550.
Okay.
Notre Dame 850.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when it dropped off because then Tennessee was plus 2,500.
Yeah. So I think DraftKings has the same order there. I think Oregon has to be your favorite, especially with this draw.
They have to play one less game than Texas too. I'm shocked that they have the same odds.
Yeah, me too. I think the idea of having to beat Ohio State twice is a little bit daunting, but I think if I look at their draw, I think they have the best path to the title game, and I do think they're the most complete team.
Oregon has the best path. They got to play Tennessee or Ohio State. Like there's,
but then they get to play. I think they have the best path.
But they have to. Then they'd have to play Texas, Clemson, or Arizona State.
I think the 3 other teams that are most likely to win the national title are on the other side of the bracket.
So what are those 3 teams?
Notre Dame, Penn State, Georgia.
Interesting.
I think there's 4 teams that really have national title caliber, and I think 3 of them are on the other side of the bracket.
Okay, so let me ask you this. You've got $100. What's your value play for the national title?
Value play?
Value play.
Let me go back to DraftKings. I think
Are you picking a team that has a bye outright
Val
for your value play?
yeah, I mean, I think Georgia makes sense because of the coach, because he's been there at 4. DraftKings has 450.
Okay.
I think that's a good play. If you want to go a little bit longer and you want to play some long odds, like I think Notre Dame is quietly really good, but I'm not sure if I bet too much against Oregon right now.
I mean, I
I
am
don't know.
salivating over that Tennessee plus 2,500. Like,
It is a little
like
I
that
mean,
seems a little crazy to me. I know they got to win 4 games. I know they'd have to beat Ohio State, Oregon, probably Texas, and then Georgia or Notre Dame.
there was a moment in time where they were undefeated and up 10-0 on Georgia.
Yeah, like
There was a moment.
it's a tough road for Tennessee. That's why it's plus 2,500. But like, all these teams are so close, and of those teams that are farther down the list, I think they have the best shot to win it. So that's why, like, in terms of value, I take Tennessee. If I'm just straight up picking a winner, I think it's hard not to pick Oregon. It's really hard not to pick Oregon.
At this point, I think it is.
But coming out of that other side of the bracket, I'm curious, like, who do you like to be in the championship game?
Right now, if I'm looking at how this bracket is, give me Oregon. I don't know, Pete. I don't know. I kind of want to say Penn State, but I feel like we just saw their best. Like we just saw everything
But
they're
Georgia's got a
capable
hurt
of.
quarterback. Boise, no one expects them to win a game.
Is it
Notre Dame could. It could be
Is it
like, I
Notre
agree
Dame?
with you that Georgia, Notre Dame, and Penn State are, one of them is probably coming out of that side of the bracket, but I'll be damned if I know who it is.
I have no idea, dude. And that makes this awesome. Like
It
that
does.
makes
It
this
really does.
such a cool. If you look at, so I run the adjusted EPA, and it's adjusted for opponent, it's adjusted for venue of the game, all of that. Notre Dame number 2 in the country in that.
Yeah.
Number
Yeah,
2.
you've had them high for a while, and it's like it really is crazy that they lost to NIU, and they really haven't played like the most difficult schedule by any means.
But they've blown
But they
through
just
people.
beat everyone by a ton, and they seem to be improving. So I don't know. I think that Notre Dame has the most legitimate shot at a national championship as they've had in a very long time.
I'd agree. I would not
Despite playing
sleep.
in the game once.
I would not sleep on Boise State with a week to prepare, though.
Yeah.
Getting into the semi, like I would not sleep on it. Their style of play is so different than everybody else. They've been really good defensively. They hung with Oregon on the road. I think they like. I would not sleep on Boise State making to the semifinal game.
If
They're not
SMU
going to be favored in that game, I'd take the Broncos.
if SMU beats Penn State and you've got Broncos versus the Mustangs, Ford has to get a presence at that game. They got to get one.
Has to. Huge game for horse girls.
Yeah,
huge.
Big Broncos versus the ponies. Yeah, it's that's going to be.
I mean, I would probably take whoever wins that game. I think I am taking Boise State plus the points.
Okay,
on a neutral field, best player in the country. Definitive style of play. They know who they are. They know how they want to play. They're healthy defensively. They have 2 really good lockdown cornerbacks. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll do it for a bracket talk. That was fun.